All right. Hello, everybody. It's Gabe. I'm sorry I've been away. I've been pretty sick, actually. You can hear it in my voice. I have this deep baritone croak to my voice now. The reason I'm doing this today is sort of self-explanatory. This show covers the U.S. men's national team, or really U.S. soccer in general. But as of late, and at its beginning, the various dysfunctions and problems inherent to the U.S. national team under Greg Berhalter. So, some of the things we're going to talk about today, as we go into this rematch against Canada and this Nations League Cup group match, which has become a must-win. That's right. In a tournament that the U.S. men's soccer media have completely eviscerated and said we were too good for it. It was a waste of our time. We shouldn't be in it. Many people said that, and some said it for different reasons than others. Some people said because we should be playing more challenging opponents and actually testing our quote new style of play under Berhalter and see if it actually works under duress, and that games against teams like Cuba and the other CONCACAF minnows are not going to really test that. Others said we're too good for it because we've arrived. We've arrived as a soccer power. We shouldn't be playing this needless tournament, which of course is ridiculous. So the sentiment today of the discussion is I want to focus on a few things. First and foremost, I want to talk about the squad selection going into this match, right? So if you hear me typing away, I'm going to be pulling up statistics and making sure that we keep our stuff sourced well today. But another thing is various journalists and sports journalists have been covering this team, and I think they've done so sometimes. The majority of the time pretty poorly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to engage with some of their content as well and talk about sort of the sentiment around the U.S. men's team right now. We're going to get into the roster selection because here's the thing. A lot of us have been asked, what could Greg Berhalter do to win our trust as a fan base? What can U.S. men's soccer do right now to bring us back into the fold? Because I think they've acknowledged, and Greg Berhalter himself, after he sort of completely ignored the fans that had made the trip to Toronto for the match against Canada, he went straight into the tunnel, didn't go over and applaud them or acknowledge them. He said it was because he was upset after the match. I think it's because he knows how unhappy with him we all are. He wrote this letter basically saying that, acknowledging that there's a lot of unrest in the fan base at the moment, right? He said that amongst other things. So what the question that people have been asked, and I've been asked, and a lot of us have been asked, is what could they do to sort of win us back? And I think a lot of that kind of question comes from a misunderstanding of this is a joke that Greg Berhalter's job is safe. We're going to touch on that in a minute. I think the position of men's U.S. fans of the U.S. men's team has been mischaracterized. So I'm not sitting here watching this game tonight hoping that the United States men's team plays poorly and loses. I never tune into a match wanting to watch crap. I never tune into a match wanting to watch our national team play in an embarrassing way, right? But at the same time, I'm not going to tune into this match and say, if we beat Canada like we're supposed to at home in Orlando in a tournament that up to this point, everybody has sort of eviscerated as being a lesser tournament, I'm not going to throw a party and throw holiday confetti if we manage to win this match, even if we do so convincingly, right? So it's not that I don't want the U.S. men's team to win. It's that a win will not satisfy me. It will not just automatically bring me on the Berhalter board, right? Because when you look at his first 9 matches and subsequent matches, the performances have not been good enough. Now, many people will point to Jurgen Klinsmann and say that he was 2-7 in his first matches, and that is absolutely true. However, what we should do is look at who the United States played and where in those matches, because it makes a significant difference. The first thing I'll say is Jurgen Klinsmann went for years without losing to Mexico, right? So his first match in charge was a 1-1 draw against Mexico. Subsequently, he lost 1-0 to Costa Rica. Subsequently, he lost 1-0 to Belgium in Europe. We won 1-0 against Honduras, lost 1-0 against Ecuador, lost 1-0 against France in France, won 3-2 against Slovenia in Europe, then railed off 4 straight wins, including against Italy away, which we had never done before, 1-0 over Mexico in Azteca. All right. So look, I'm not hailing Jurgen Klinsmann as some sort of managerial genius that we should be lucky to have back. But what I am going to say is that this whole idea of comparing Berhalter's wins and loss record to the first to the early tenure of Jurgen Klinsmann is apples and oranges. Because Klinsmann was clearly trying things out in his first year, trying new players and things. Berhalter's settled on a group of players that he likes, and it's pretty clear he's calling in the same guys over some guys that are subsequently a lot more deserving, right? So that's one thing. A second thing is no one ever said in the beginning of Jurgen Klinsmann's career that results don't matter. Yeah, they weren't going to sack him if he lost 1-0 to Belgium. But the fact is, if you look at these score lines, the U.S. hadn't been thoroughly dominated in any match that Jurgen Klinsmann had coached in the beginning. And the fact of the matter is, Greg Berhalter's rolled out teams that have had a difficult time getting results against Curacao. So here's the reality. It's going to take more than a result against Canada to win me back. Or I wasn't in the Greg Berhalter camp to begin with. I was sort of the position of, well, give him a fair shot. It took us a year to get this guy in place. A lot of the U.S. Men's soccer team fandom doesn't particularly care for Craig Burley of ESPN Extra Time Show, but I got to be honest, he nailed it right on the head when he was talking about this, what he called balderdash coming out of U.S. soccer, saying we've left no stone left unturned. We've scoured the globe and we've looked at the very best. They interviewed 2 people. We know they interviewed 2 people. Right? They didn't interview Tata Martino. Go back to my first video that I made on this channel. The U.S. men's national team is a mess because it really talks about, and other people have talked about this as well, the joke of a search process and the fact that, Earnie Stewart, I'm kind of jumping around here, and I promise I'll get to your comments here in a minute. Earnie Stewart had a decent career as a player and has had a semi-decent or a respectable degree of experience as an executive, right? As at Alkmaar, and then coming back to the United States. Here's the deal, though. He's all ruffled. He's all pissed off because conspiracy theorists are calling into question the process of hiring Greg Berhalter. And he wants everyone to know that he's the one in charge. Okay, great. If you're the one in charge, then we can blame you for this poor run of results. We can blame you for taking an entire year to get a guy that you could have had to begin with and losing that whole year where you line up teams like Belgium, like Honduras, like Ecuador, like France, like Slovenia, like Italy to test the squad and see who plays best. Now, Berhalter doesn't have that year, right? He went to a Gold Cup. He's in the Nations League Cup, and pretty soon we're going to be in World Cup qualifying. That means the central group of players that he's brought in and he continues to bring in, he's not bringing these guys in for fun because he's waiting for other guys to become available. He's bringing in these guys because these are his guys now. That means Daniel Lovitz, Will Trapp, Giazzi Zardes, Walker Zimmerman, and any LAFC apologists who come in on my comment section to try to make the case that Walter Zimmerman's some kind of hidden world-class first back clearly didn't watch last season. Clearly didn't watch it, right? So these guys are the ones he's calling in. Fine. Berhalter, if you have your guys, call your guys in. But please don't give us these lines of, we call players in based on their club form, and not just their club form, but how their clubs are doing, how their clubs are playing. So Daniel Lovitz plays for the Montreal Impact. There's a classy organization. This is a guy that was brought in and the whole Canadian media said, what? Why is this guy in the team? Because they know he's not any good, right? So, look, and all of this comes with an asterisk, right? I'm not pulling a Stephen A. Smith here talking about Rasho Nesterovic like he doesn't deserve to be in the NBA or anything like that. All these guys deserve to be in MLS, and all these guys, if you put me on a football pitch with them, they would play me under the table, right? I haven't played a competitive match in over 10 years, right? So I'm not. This isn't some sort of anti MLS player rant thinking that these guys can't play at all. They don't belong anywhere near the national team. I understand why you call Daniel Levitz in time and again. I understand why you call some of these guys in when the Euro guys are all occupied. But you have Dwayne Holmes, who in his limited time with the national team looked really good before he picked up an injury. You have Julian Green. And I don't care what anybody says, whether you're in the comment section or Twitter, Bundesliga 2 is a better league than MLS. It's a fact. The rate of play is faster. The players are more intelligent. They're more positionally aware. The tactics are more sophisticated. It may not be quite as physical. I'll give them that. But the reality is it's a better league, guys. The championship is a better league than MLS. Liga MX is a better league than MLS. The Danish league is a better league than MLS. We could point to maybe one or two leagues out in Europe, maybe at the third division. I would still take most League One teams in England to beat the best of MLS. If anybody watched the MLS Cup, you know what I'm talking about. I would take Sunderland to beat Seattle Sounders. I absolutely would if I was a betting man. Anyway, I'm getting way off the point here. The point is, Berhalter has brought in these guys. And he's brought some of them in at the expense of other players like Matt Miazga. Tell me that Walker Zimmerman deserves a call-up instead of Matt Miazga. You can't even make the case to me that Aaron Long belongs in this team over Matt Miazga right now, given the form of the previous season and how long it's been, actually, since he's played a competitive match. Now, remember, Greg Berhalter is the one that said club form and the way your club is played and the way you've played for that club is the central driving force in him calling players up. So either Greg Berhalter rates MLS above these other clubs and other leagues, or he's just pissing on our face and telling us it's raining. It's raining, which I think is probably what's happening. But still, if not, so if first thing, if you want to ask me what the team can do to kind of win some of my confidence back, call up the best players. That's one. Show that you can evaluate talent. Will Trapp doesn't belong in this team. He doesn't. He absolutely does not. I have nothing against Will Trapp as a person. Nothing. He seems like a really nice guy, a high character guy. Talks about servant leadership all the time. Good for you. And I'm not being sarcastic. I'm being serious. Good for him. But here's the deal. Will Trapp isn't even a decent MLS midfielder. I want to let that sink in for a minute. He's not even a decent or a above average central midfielder in the MLS. He's not even in the top 30 of midfielders in the MLS. So give me a break. He belongs in the squad. Give me a break. Give me an absolute break. There's no metric. There are no advanced analytics. There's nothing that you can produce. And I've checked that will necessitate or justify a Will Trapp call-up into this team. And if we want to rate MLS, well, let's rate MLS, but let's look at the top performers in MLS. Most of them are not American players. Most of them are not. The huge majority of them are not. The only American players that continue to consistently perform are the goalkeepers. And Jordan Morris had a decent postseason. But I also want to prevent the U.S. men's national team apparatus from running away and talking about. I've seen people on Twitter talk about how he's the most informed player in a U.S. shirt. Give me a break. I watched MLS Cup. Come on. I mean, good player in MLS. He's hardly dominating. Look at Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Look at how many goals he's had at how many games. And I'm not comparing Zlatan to Jordan Morris. They're not the same type of player. But look at Carlos Vela in 60 matches, how many goals he's scored. And Jordan Morris isn't a center forward. I understand that. But if he was that great of a player, and remember, Carlos Vela didn't exactly set the world alight in Europe, right? Absolutely didn't. Came to MLS and lit it on fire, plain and simple, because it's a lower standard. It's easier to score goals. Jordan Morris hasn't been a dominant player in MLS. And I'm not looking for him to be Zlatan. I'm not looking for him to be Carlos Vela. I'm looking for him to be, Clint Dempsey before he left for Fulham. That would be nice. Anyway, so what can the U.S. men's national team do to win a guy like me back? And I'm not anybody special. I'm sort of I very typical of the men's program fan right now, and you have to pick the right players. Show me you can evaluate talent. Show me that our national team isn't some sort of advertisement for Don Garber's agenda. Show me that our the players we're calling in aren't an attempt to sort of justify ourselves and to say, well, we're just as good as people. And no, you're not. You're absolutely not. And if you don't know that by now, you're a hopeless case. So when Ernie Stewart says, and this goes back to the whole point of don't piss in my face and then tell me I'm getting rained on. When Ernie Stewart says we're evaluating progress, and I've seen progress, and progress means, if for those of you who don't know what the word means, you've gone from one point here and then you've moved forward to somewhere else. So it means you're in a better spot than where you were when you were before. So when he tells me that we're seeing progress because of a 25, he calls it a 25-minute spell. It was really a 20-minute spell out of 90 minutes in a Gold Cup game that we got crushed against Mexico, which we happened to pitter patter the ball around in our own half without getting completely crushed for 20 minutes. That is a sign of progress. Well, funny old thing, the match that Bob Bradley got fired on in the Gold Cup, the first 25 minutes of the game, the U.S. was all over Mexico. We went up 2-0. We lost that game 4-2. So please tell me how this necessitates progress, because at least we scored goals back then. It's absolute garbage. It's nonsense. And again, I'm going to bring up Bob Bradley. Bob Bradley, I'm not going to ever say that Bob Bradley is going to be a world beater as a manager. I think Bob Bradley's become kind of an embittered guy based on, the contributions he gave in Egypt and got sacked from that job, went and took some really difficult jobs in Europe, and then went over to Swansea City and got blasted in that job. Right? It was a tough job. And was treated pretty poorly by the media, didn't feel like he had a fair shake, came back to MLS, and everybody will notice that his attitude towards the media is 100% different now. His attitude in general is a lot different than it used to be. Bob Bradley is not giving any fucks anymore, which makes for an entertaining interview, but it doesn't necessarily, make for make for a great manager who's open to be criticized or, still learning. I think Bob Bradley thinks he's fucking arrived. Right? My point. Why am I talking about this? Well, my point is even Bob Bradley, when he was manager of the national team, knew that if you call in a guy like Frank Simic from Sheffield Wednesday, playing center back or playing right back in the championship, you were getting a better quality player than calling up the best right back in MLS. Now, why? Why? Because the standard's higher. Positionally, you have to be better. Your focus has to be there for 90 minutes because when you're a right back in the English Championship and the ball comes to your feet, you don't have 7 seconds to look around. MLS hasn't changed that much. So please, do not tell me that these are the best players available, Greg Berhalter. Do not tell me, Ernie Stewart, that 25 minutes of okay play in a game in which we got smashed is a sign of progress. It's not. There was a period in the game against Trinidad and Tobago where we played pretty well. And that everyone knows the game I'm talking about, the game where we crashed out of World Cup qualifying. Clint Dempsey hit the posts. Christian Pulisic made some bright moves. This is the USNT show. I'm going to get into the comment section right now. I'm so sorry to those of you who have neglected. I'm going to start with the most recent. How do you feel about the Sounders coach replacing Greg Berhalter? I don't feel good about it at all. First of all, I don't think Berhalter is going to get sacked. And second of all, I don't know much about the manager. So it's not that I feel badly about it, but I can't say that I feel good. I don't know much about him. I watched Seattle play. I wasn't super impressed. They play a pragmatic style of football. I can't say it's I don't know. So I'm not going to speak out of ignorance. I don't know. I don't want to slag him off. Dwayne Holmes needs to be in this team. Yes, he does. Yep, he absolutely does. Jesse Marsh, or the coach from San Jose, Jesse Marsh, I hope goes nowhere because at RB Salzburg, he's doing a hell of a job. That team scores a ton of goals, plays really entertaining football, and I hope he continues to coach in the Champions League. Landon Donovan said the Canada game, the U.S. looked like they weren't competing. Yeah, but Landon Donovan, here's the thing, Bill Cosby. Landon Donovan, just came out and talked about how the players need to have fire in their bellies, that the other teams have had fire in their bellies. Yeah, Landon Donovan had such a fire in his belly that he quit the team during World Cup qualifying, went out and to find himself in Myanmar or wherever the fuck he went, while his brothers in arms were battling for competition to get into the World Cup. And then when they did, when all the work was done on the backs of other people, Landon Donovan wanted back in the team suddenly. He was unretired. He was refreshed. He was ready to play. And Jurgen Klinsmann said, "No, fuck off. Of course I'm not bringing you. I can't rely on you. You check out." So no. I think that's really why Jurgen Klinsmann left him off. Klinsmann said his standard wasn't high enough. I don't think that's true. I think Landon Donovan was skilled enough to play on that World Cup team. I think he wanted people to buy in. And Landon Donovan thought he could just stroll right back in the team because he's a legend. A legend of what? And this is the thing about U.S. soccer. U.S. soccer is arrogant to a degree that it has never, ever deserved. Let's look at the 2010 France team. Remember that team? That team had Nicolas Anelka, Thierry Henry. What the hell is his name? Manchester United left back. What the hell? They also had William Gallas. They had a ton of great players. And these guys were entitled. Franck Ribéry, entitled legends in their own mind, and they crashed out in the group stage against lesser opponents, right? So I'm sorry, entitlement gets you nowhere. Gets you absolutely nowhere. Okay, Bruno, let me interject here. Mental health is a big deal. I'm not saying it's not. Mental health is a big deal. Absolutely. If Landon Donovan had said, I'm struggling with mental health issues and I need to step away from the game, that's absolutely fine. Now, I could be misinformed. I don't think that's the reason why. He said he was losing his love for the game and, traveling around helped him do that. But if he was like clinically depressed or with a real mental illness, I'm not going to criticize that at all. I would be the last one to do it. But I will say this. You can't just walk back into a team that you've left and expect to get picked. It doesn't happen, right? So I respect any reason that he took to leave. Oh, and that's what I said, Bruno. I didn't say that there were better players available. I said that's what Klinsmann said. But clearly he didn't pick him because he felt like he wasn't reliable. I feel like Landon quit. That's what I feel like. All right, scrolling back up through the comments here. 25 minutes, we looked good, you guys. Yeah, imagine being a barometer for your job. Yeah, especially when you look at 25 minutes in context, and it was really 20 minutes. I don't care what Ernie Stewart says, in context of the other 70. So not even half, not even half of a half. So we're talking about a quarter of what you do. 75% was bad. 25% was good. Imagine that. No way. No job in the world gets evaluated on that. Anthony Robinson and Carter Vickers are better than Lovitz and Long at a higher level, and still yet they're with the U23s, even though they've consistently played for their clubs. I mean, maybe they're ramping them up for the Olympics, but I agree. I mean, Robinson's been better. Vickers, I don't really know. Vickers, his performances in the championship, I'm only going to weigh him against Miazga. But I certainly think he's better than Long. I think that Long brings something that different than Walker Zimmerman does. Long is faster on his feet, right? I'm not sure how fast Vickers is. I know Miazga isn't as fast as Long, so I'm okay with Aaron Long being in the team. I'm not okay with Walker Zimmerman being in the team because he can't seem to play the ball off his feet. The only thing he's good at is winning headers, and a lot of time he's out of position. Ask any LAFC fan who's honest. Will Trapp wanted to go to Europe after his dismal form this season. According to a source, no one wants to buy him. Yeah, I wouldn't want to buy him. Other MLS teams may not necessarily want him right now. Bielsa had Argentina playing well within the first year he coached them in the 90s. Yep. Sampaoli had Chile playing well. Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't necessarily take like a long time. And, if you wanted to take a long time, maybe don't wait a whole fucking year until you appoint the guy that you knew you were going to hire from the beginning. Yep, it is a joke that Berhalter's job is, quote, safe. Miazga is center back one. Yep. He helped win a gold, try his best with groin tendonitis, kept coming back. Asia Donovan would have been an excellent leader. See, no, I disagree. Landon Donovan has not been a good leader throughout his career. I think people are looking back at him with rosy colored glasses. And look, as a player, absolutely, I would have loved to have had an informed Landon Donovan at that World Cup. That would have been awesome. Wasn't a lot of evidence that he was in form. Do I think that he was a better choice than some other players like Brad Davis or whatever? Yeah, sure, absolutely. But Landon Donovan is a guy. I mean, this is a guy who publicly criticized David Beckham to the media without talking to him at LA Galaxy. Please tell me how great of a leader Landon Donovan was. Comes out in the press, has eviscerated a number of different managers. Look, he's a great interview. He always speaks his mind. He's kind of a unique cat, right? That being said, I never thought he was much of a leader. Sorry, I don't agree. Berhalter's Columbus Crew only played good during the MLS playoffs. Do you think Earnie Stewart is putting all his hope this translates into World Cup qualifiers? Maybe. You have to remember, Greg Berhalter's team didn't win MLS Cup, right? So, and everyone talks about this vaunted style of play, and they keep calling him. I asked a journalist today. There's a good piece in the Athletic about the fire and ice, the approaches between Canada's manager and the U.S. men's national team manager, Greg Berhalter, and the differences there. And one of the characterizations of Berhalter is that he's a super smart guy, super cerebral, and he's a logician. He doesn't make emotional decisions. It's all sort of logic. Tell me that calling Will Trapp into the team is a logical decision, not an emotional one. Get out of here. I want to see. Yes, a leader off the pitch. No, I agree. Right. Let's see here. So I want to see what Brooks can do starting first. His presence has been missed. Yeah. Now, John Brooks is an imperfect product, right? But it's funny because people judge different players differently. We know John Brooks is better than the other options, so we judge him a little bit harsher if he's out of position one or two times, right? And they'll give him a lower player rating. But a guy like Aaron Long coming out of Red Bull New York will be out of position like 4 or 5 times, has the speed to make it up, and they'll be like, he really did a job for us in the absence of whoever, and we'll give him like a higher rating. So there's a double standard there. If it's on one hand, the same media that wants to act like MLS is the same and just as good as all these leagues expects more out of the European guys because like they're from better leagues. So they contradict their own points by judging them to a different standard. Berhalter's praised for a +5 goal differential across 5 different seasons, 0 trophies, and making the playoffs in the league where half the teams make it to the playoffs. Yeah, exactly. So this is where I think analytics are important, but you don't want to get too lost in analytics if you're not judging the product on the field in terms of results. Besides Pulisic, who would you say is our second best player? I think we don't have enough from Tyler Adams to say he's our second best player. I want to say so. I mean, the way he was playing in the Bundesliga before he got hurt was very, very good, but he's a 19-year-old kid. I mean, look at all the players in the world who have been flashes in a pan. So we don't know who Tyler Adams is as a player yet. That being said, the minute he starts playing, we call him back in, obviously. I think... No, I agree. Ken is. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you need more data, right? So like, and they absolutely played super well, and he played amazing, and and not just statistically, but the eye test. I mean, he was picking out great passes. He was disrupting passing lanes. He was doing the dirty work. He was getting forward in the attack, playing wonderful balls, creating great chances. He played great. What I'm saying is I think he has less than 10 appearances, or I'm sorry, less than 15 appearances in the Bundesliga. So that's all I'm saying is I can't say absolute. If we just judge it on the number of games he's played, sure, but it's hard for me to say that. I mean, there were games, 10, 15 years ago, about 15 years ago, Justin Matt played for the Chicago Fire, and everybody thought this guy was going to be the next big thing in U.S. soccer. He was going to go abroad, and Clint Dempsey kind of co-signed on him, and then he faded and disappeared, right? So, we need more time. I think the second best player for the U.S. men's team is probably John Brooks. I'm not looking at skill. I'm looking at like importance to. You asked best, not most important. Let me revise my answer. Yeah, probably John Brooks. I'm going to just live with it. I think what he brings for us is super, super important. I think that, yeah, that's probably it. First Pulisic is obviously true. Oh yeah, Sergino Dest. Yeah. Yeah, it's tough for me to say. It's hard for me to say with the young guys who haven't had a lot of time. I think that Weston McKennie is really important. That being said, he's really inconsistent. I chalk a lot of that up to him playing in different positions for his club and not really being able to settle into one thing. Because here's the thing, like he's not a true holding midfielder. Like he does a good job of getting stuck into tackles, has a lot of energy and bite, but he's not quite as slick on the ball. That being said, he's really good at getting forward. He's really good in the box. So you want him to be this box to box midfielder. I actually think McKennie would be our second or third best player who's available and healthy right now if we played a high press system, but we don't. We play this stupid system where we're not equipped to play this ultra possession kind of Barcelona ticky tack type system, which doesn't work. That doesn't work for us. Okay. Who should have been called up this window? Yeah, Dwayne Holmes, Matt Miazga, Julian Green. He's hurt right now, but I would also say Fabian Johnson. He's still in his early 30s. So we couldn't call him up right now, but he's never going to get a call in, I don't think. Berhalter loves his Daniel Levitz, but this is a guy whose team is at the top of the Bundesliga and whose manager raves about him, calls him an all-purpose weapon. So, Pulisic, Adams, Dest, hard to argue with those three. Brooks, Sargent. Sorry, you have Dest listed twice as sixth and third. McKinney, Weah. Yeah, Weah's tough. Boyd, no way. I've watched Boyd play in his limited opportunities with his club. Not super great. Zach Steffen is going to play in the Premier League. I agree. And then Keaton Parks. Keaton Parks is a potentially strong candidate. Right. So I want to flip over to a different mode of discussion here and talk about a little bit about the expectations of lineups going forward. So Greg Berhalter keeps talking about the group, and I think we have to, and this is one of the reasons it's going to be really hard for me to ever get behind Greg Berhalter, because he clearly has his group of guys, and it includes guys like Daniel Levitz, Will Trapp, Giazzi Zardes, guys who don't deserve to be in the team. Now, why do I think he's doing that? Well, there have been rumors, as of yet unsubstantiated. I've never seen any proof of this, so I want to make that clear. But there is this sentiment out there that Berhalter has some sort of incentive, whether it be financial, whether it be contractual, or whether it just be a sentimental thing, to include a MLS heavy roster every time in call-ups. Right? Now, here's what I'll say. One of the reasons that MLS players don't seem to translate their talent the longer they stay in the league to the international game or be able to have successful careers abroad is because the pacing isn't there. The positional awareness isn't there. The intensity week to week isn't there. The fighting for your place isn't there. One of the reasons that isn't there is because there are no real consequences for not making the playoffs. There are no real consequences for teams that continue to finish at the bottom of the league. And there's nothing to play for after a certain period of time. So you have these guys that are only playing maybe a handful of meaningful games in their entire season. How are they expected to replicate that pressure environment that you have even in Mexico, in Europe, in the UK? You can't, right? One of the reasons that doesn't exist is because there's no promotion relegation system here in the United States. Let me tell you why that is. If for those of you who don't know, many of you do, and this is a big talking point, and there are more elements to this than what I'm talking about. But remember, if you're, let's say that I'm a billionaire and I want to buy a club in the United States, right? I want to buy an MLS club. Well, here's the deal. I don't come in and say, right, I'm gonna buy or I'm gonna start a club and call it FC Manchester. I'm from Manchester, New Hampshire. They would never have one there, but this is hypothetical. No, you buy into MLS. So I wouldn't start a club and then have to go through the promotion system or whatever. I wouldn't buy a club and then have them join USL. If I wanted to have them compete in the soccer apparatus, I would basically be buying into MLS. And then MLS is going to help me determine a location for my club, right? Now, for MLS as a business, and I'm just talking about money, cash flow, all that kind of stuff, it's great for MLS because you're essentially guaranteeing that you can look and see which markets are most fertile and will make you the most money, will have the most engagement, which municipality and state will give you more money for stadiums and has the real estate. You can you can you can essentially make sure that you can go in ahead of time and cook up a supporters group and all sorts of stuff, and then you'll sort of from the beginning hit the ground running. So there are benefits to just buying into MLS. The problem with that is, in terms of the competitive product on the field, outside of margins and money, is that now you have an entire league um, that essentially it doesn't really matter who wins MLS Cup every year. It doesn't matter who goes to the playoffs. It doesn't matter who finishes at the bottom of the league. It doesn't matter who wins the community, is it called the Supporter Shield? I'm sorry, I don't even remember the regular season title. It doesn't even matter because at the end of the day, these clubs aren't just going to fail on their own. You're buying into MLS, right? So I don't think promotion relegation will ever happen. Because these owners, unless you force owners to choose to liquidate their shares and sell the club, because these guys didn't buy a soccer club in America or start one, that they bought into MLS, right? So it absolutely undercuts competition. It undercuts the league standard. If you're going to transfer, if even when you're going to transfer abroad, the MLS has more to say than a club on its own would, in any other league. So the reality is they're shutting down competition. There are other leagues in the United States, right? And by the way, the MLS isn't just an American league. There are teams in Canada, right? So the fact that US soccer as an apparatus seems to have such an ardent agenda to prop up MLS doesn't even do so to their own gain. As we've seen in the results on the field, trying to pretend that the MLS is this huge league that's arrived, as Don Garber said, right? And having every single MLS team prop up national team matches as if it's their job, right? What has that actually done for the American player? It hasn't done a lot. Because smart MLS teams that want to spend money are bringing in designated players from abroad. And I love this. I love this. So when Zlatan Ibrahimovic arrived, everybody in U.S. soccer was like, well, he's eccentric, he's weird, he's tough to deal with, but we love him. He's ours now. And it didn't matter what stuff he said, how arrogant he was, and how insufferable his personality could be. They loved it. They co-signed it. Stewart Holden referred to it as getting Zlataned, right? Until Ibrahimovic started criticizing the standard of MLS. Then suddenly he's toxic. When he started saying that he's a Ferrari surrounded by Fiats, then it was toxic. Then it wasn't good for the league. Now, Stewart Holden tweeted out the other day, the Galaxy will be better without him. Oh, really? 53 goals in 56 games, or 52 in 56? They're going to be better, huh? Where's that going to come from? Sebastian Lletget? Give me a break. Give me a break. Wayne Rooney was the darling of MLS until he started criticizing MLS. Want to know why guys like Alexi Lalas say that Carlos Vela is a top 20 player in the world? Preposterously, he's not. It's because he's been super complimentary of MLS. So, think about this. The players that are really making headlines in MLS aren't American players. But the American media wants you to believe that Will Trapp is a once-in-a-generation leader, that Daniel Lovitz is an up-and-coming left back, that Paxton Pomykal, and I know a lot of people on here are fans of this guy, is the second coming of Christian Pulisic in some way. And look, this is not a criticism of Paxton Pomykal. He just signed a 4-year deal. He's a 19-year-old. I hope he transfers out now. I hope he moves abroad. I hope he goes to Germany. I hope he goes to Denmark. I hope he goes to Belgium. I hope he goes. I don't necessarily hope he goes to the Premier League. I think it's going to be a little bit too physical for him. But the point is, I hope he goes someplace where he can continue to develop in terms of awareness, in terms of intelligence, in terms of playing the game, in terms of speed of play, all that kind of stuff. I hope he does that, because if he stays in MLS, I mean, think about this. How much better do you think Jordan Morris is going to get in MLS? He's not. He's not. And he's not even lighting the league on fire. Yes, MLS loves hyping up their youth, even when some of them haven't proved anything. Absolutely right. Yep, absolutely right. I agree. I think the MLS could be a great league for selling these players. And FC Dallas's academies, proven to be pretty decent. Sell the players. Let them go. Let them go. Stop inflating their price tags. Aaron Long, they wanted like something like 8 million plus for Aaron Long. And West Ham United was like, go and do one. And they were right to. Why in the world would you pay that much money for Aaron Long? Think about the money they paid for Clint Dempsey. Fulham did. You know what? I'm going to look it up right now. I think it was like 2.5 million or maybe 1.5 million. Something really low. Let's see. Clint Dempsey transfer to Fulham. Let's look. Okay. No, this is it's hard because it was really old. Yeah, okay. So I'm not going to get the right. I'm going to get transfer history. Here we go on Transfer Market. All right. So Clint Dempsey transferred from the New England Revolution, right, to Fulham for the whopping price of $1.14 million. No, I'm sorry. That's wrong. $3.42 million. This is Clint Dempsey. This is one of the best attacking players we've ever had in this country. No, I mentioned Zardes Cosby. I mentioned him. Go back on the replay. So here's the deal: when you're giving numbers like 8 million out for Aaron Long, who has a handful of international matches, and by the way, when you look at Matt Miazga and his time in MLS and how he rated and the results that he brought in and how he played, his standard of play compared to Aaron Long, Matt Miazga was head and shoulders above Aaron Long's performance. And a club like West Ham is looking at, well, Chelsea brought him in for a pretty decent fee and loaned him out to Reading. Do we want a guy that is not as good as the guy that's playing full-time at Reading, isn't even in the Premiership right now? No. Why would we pay the same amount of money? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. All right, getting a little bit off track here, but what happened to Lewis Gill, I think you're talking about? I have no idea. Lost in obscurity. Another overrated player coming through the MLS ranks. I think Red Bull wanted 15 million for Long. Yeah, exactly. Absolute nonsense. So I want to direct the conversation here. If you're watching the team tonight, if you're watching the U.S. men's team play, what do you want to, is there anything that they could show you on the field, on the pitch tonight, that would convince you that things are going back in the right direction? Go. What is it? Miazga's EPL ready. I agree he is, but there's nothing that's going to change my mindset. Nothing. 5-0 victory. Nothing. No hope without Adams. Think about that though, Sham. Think about what you're saying there. And I understand what you're saying, and I'm really excited about Tyler Adams. But is he even 20 years old yet? We're putting all of our hopes on a 20-year-old with less than 20 games in the Bundesliga. They were brilliant performances, but that is a really precarious position to be in. His system is 10 months of fail. Right. Okay. So I can't see anything. You know what would change my mind? Maybe here's what would change my mind. If Berhalter held a press conference and said, "Look, I've really tried to bring in new guys from MLS who I felt were up to the standard. And some of the European guys we knew that we were going to call the closer we got to qualifying. We wanted to check some players out. Now, as we move forward, we're going to be a little bit more selective in who we call up to the men's national team camps, because we need people to be playing in top levels, right? Bob Bradley said that. Bruce Arena used to say stuff like that. Tons of people have said things like that. Klinsman said it like that, said that, and they eviscerated him for it. That you hate MLS. That is what could one thing. I'm going to give out three things. So number one, if Berhalter changed team selection, that's number one. Number two, if Berhalter said, right, yes, we want to keep the ball more, but with the players we have, we want to play a high press style. We want to try to dispossess the opponent. And we want to, as he would say, disorganize the opponent. And we want to keep the ball in their end. So it's not just about knocking it around. It's about keeping the pressure on and using our youth, athleticism, and physicality to dispossess the opponent and generate scoring chances. That's number two. Number three. What's the third thing? Wait, Berhalter could win me back. If we actually fucking won games we're supposed to win consistently after we've done the other two things. I don't care if we win 1-0 against Canada tonight. That doesn't change anything. If we go out there, Berhalter will be like, well, I'm vindicated my style of play. Fantastic. You beat a team you should have beaten 100 times. A team ranked 69 in FIFA. By the way, FIFA rankings are garbage. I admit it. I know it. The fact of the matter is, the result tonight, it's funny because I'm upset for Earnie Stewart saying results don't matter. He's got his man. Well, I'm here on the other end of the spectrum and saying this result doesn't matter because unless before the match he switches up his whole lineup, and if he had called a bunch of players in, and if he had actually given Dwayne Holmes and Julian Green and turned the U.S. men's team into a meritocracy instead of an opportunity, a photo op for Don Garber's world-class league MLS, then yeah, I'd probably be a little bit more enthusiastic. But I know he's going to continue to call in these bums who don't even play for average MLS teams, who aren't even considered above average players for those average teams, to play and put on the red, white, and blue, the country I love and the team that I've followed for decades. I'm supposed to be excited about this? No, I'm not going to be excited about it until something fundamentally changes. I don't think Greg Berhalter is going to do it. That's why I'm Berhalter out. But if he does, by some miracle, if after, let's say he loses against Canada, or even if he wins and he changes his approach, brings in legitimate players who are plying their trade in difficult leagues, right? Where there's more pressure on them to perform every single week, where they're not going to, where they're actually playing well, and maybe he employs a style of play that actually fits the profiles of our players instead of trying to turn us into FC Barcelona or fucking Manchester City. We're not that good. No team in CONCACAF plays like that. Mexico doesn't even play that way. I mean, they play more of a possession game, but they don't play that way. Give me a break. Rant, but I'm right. I'm right about this. I'll die on this hill. If Berhalter had ages of time to think of how he wanted to run the program. They had a whole year fake search to give him all the time he wanted to complete his obligations for the Columbus Crew. And instead, I'm sorry. Let's see. You know how we know Stewart is bullshitting? In that same interview, he was talking about conspiracy theories and being very defensive. Yeah, he's rattled. He's absolutely rattled. At the same time, I don't expect. I mean, what kind of a sporting director comes out and says, "Well, if the coach loses today, then he's going to lose his job"? I mean, that'd be stupid. But I did it. I would expect for him to come out and say, "Look, the results always matter." He said the results don't matter. What the fuck should we buy tickets for? They keep jacking up ticket prices as if we're seeing this amazing product on the field. They're pretending that this team has grown in value since the 2010 World Cup and the 2014 World Cup. Guess what? It hasn't. It has not. It has gotten worse on the field since then. So give me a break. The best team, the best result in the World Cup history for the United States came out of a counterattacking style. 2002. It's more than 10 years ago, by the way. Almost 20 now. Unbelievable. Berhalter continues to bring in Bradley, who hasn't been good enough to call up. Yeah. So, okay. We don't have a ton of central midfielders, right? So I do think there are some spots. Obviously wouldn't bring in a guy like Will Trapp or whatever. And I've talked about that kind of ad nauseum. I don't want to keep beating up on him. But you bring in Bradley because he has experience in matches. I'm not bringing him into play. I'm bringing him into camp and to do some mentoring of the young guys. Although, now that I say that, do we want new Zen MLS Bradley mentoring or angry chip on his shoulder Bundesliga and Chievo Verona Michael Bradley, who played great football? Great question. I think Michael has changed with his dad. I think he's, as Latin said, he thinks he's the philosopher of football. Let's see. All the former players are disappointing in how they don't speak out. Well, here's the thing. And there's a lot. I chatted on Twitter with a journalist that used to cover U.S. soccer for ESPN, and has talked a little bit about how confrontational, or not necessarily confrontational, but you'd get treated differently. If you cover the Mexican team, so U.S. soccer would be like, "Well, you're covering the other side too," and get all upset about that. I've heard that Michael Kammerman of U.S. Soccer media relations threatens to pull press credentials of people that ask the wrong questions. Heard that from a different source. I've also heard that U.S. Soccer, the federation, will call the publications you're working for if they're unhappy and try to put pressure on you if you're asking the wrong questions or if you're going against the status quo, things like that. It's you've heard me refer to U.S. Soccer as a cabal. It is. It absolutely is. It's a joke. It's a joke. It's an arrogant, pompous, entitled, stupid cabal of frauds who can't stand criticism, call it conspiracy theories. It's not a conspiracy theory when you have the brother of the manager get be involved in his appointment after a year of searching where they said they interviewed tons of people. That was a lie. They didn't. So it's not a conspiracy theory. It's been proven. Unbelievable. I know this is off topic, but do you think Lalanes will choose Mexico or US? He's killing it with Wolfsburg. He scores every time. Yeah, fantastic. He didn't get called in to the US youth team, right? So it's pretty clear. And the only people giving Lalanes any love are US fans because the federation isn't giving him shit. What would you do? You're out there knocking in a ton of goals for Wolfsburg's youth teams, and you're getting passed over by Brooks Lennon of Real Salt Lake. Go look his stats up. Tell me he belongs in the team. Give me a break. Give me a break. It's absolutely pathetic. Yeah. Alejandro Moreno. Yep, he gets a lot of stick, and I don't always agree with him, but. I mean, yeah, and he was asked to leave. Andrea Canales was omitted invitations, or it's not that she wasn't invited; she just wasn't informed, and all these other media people were informed. That there's an absolute double standard. I hope Yuli chooses the U.S. I hope so. I think he's a great talent. I think he, Alex Mendez, and Richie Ledesma are the future of that midfield. But fuck's sake, they're playing with fire. The U.S. soccer should be giving Romain Gall the platform to be seen by bigger clubs, given his club situation. I don't know. I mean, I haven't. Is he still getting on the pitch regularly? I mean, you got to be playing, I think. Yes, absolutely right. What you just said in terms of perception of bias, correct. Any job. Look, so I'm not going to talk too much about myself. I work in a really competitive environment, right? At a pretty high profile company. And if I submit a referral for someone to work on my team, if I just know them, if I know another guy, I'm like, hey, he'd be great with us. I'm not allowed to be on the interview panel. I'm not even allowed to be in the process. I can put his name forward or her name forward or their name forward, but I'm not allowed to be a part of it. And I don't work at US Soccer. It's absolutely ridiculous for people to think that this is okay. Serious question here. Seriously, it's obvious our top prospects are headed for Europe. To Europe, yep. At what point will the Federation admit this? The Federation should never, ever, ever. And this is what drives me crazy. They were pissed at Jurgen Klinsmann. If you guys think that Jurgen Klinsmann was fired because of bad results, you're wrong. Now, the bad results made his firing inevitable. And I'm not saying he had results good enough to stay around. What I am saying is that a whole year before the results started turning poor, a whole year before they got ready to axe him for a string of bad results, they had contacted Bruce Arena about replacing him. He knew about it. Bruce Arena talked about it. The timestamps of that correlate extremely closely to some of his most critical comments about players coming back to MLS and the standard of MLS. U.S. soccer has a cozy relationship with MLS because there's no competition here in the United States, even though MLS is not just an American league, it's Canadian as well. MLS is going to serve MLS. That's fine. But MLS has not served U.S. soccer, and U.S. soccer has put them in pole position and refuses to cultivate an environment where MLS can even be questioned. And that's a joke. It's a joke. It's disgraceful. It's disgusting. So they're not going to admit it. The U.S. went from, remember how proud everyone was of Clint Dempsey going to Fulham? Fulham was like a low-table relegation threatened English side, right? And they were like, oh, he's arrived. He's going to Fulham. Every single American player going abroad was celebrated. And now there's this idea that the MLS has arrived and all these, because all our senior players came home once their best years were behind them. Michael Bradley's form has dipped dramatically since he left Roma and came to MLS. But we can continue to put our heads in the sand and pretend that players aren't going to get better by going abroad. And the Federation should be telling them that. Go abroad. Our goal is to get U.S. players to the point where they're competing with the best in the world. Our goal is not to prop up MLS. Hypothetically, yes, if MLS grows and continues to get better, it could help the U.S. team. So far, I don't think it has. Do you think Haji should get a call up due to playing time? I personally think he should get called up. Yeah, I think so. I mean, he hasn't knocked in a ton of goals, so I'd like to see him like in a camp. But yeah, Klinsmann was fired because of the bias. I agree. U.S. soccer had to wait a few months later and refused to back Klinsmann after the first two Hex losses. I mean, Klinsmann, I think we should have kept him until the end of the Hex and then maybe brought in a different manager for the World Cup. But, hindsight's always 20/20. They passed up Tab Ramos because it would ruin their plans for hiring Berhalter. Yeah, Tab Ramos being passed up is ridiculous. Tab Ramos is clearly salty about his time at U.S. soccer. And honestly, I'm supposed to be talking on this show. Like the whole point. And I have a hard time putting into words how annoyed I am with how Tab Ramos was treated. Unbelievable. Let's see. Clint Dempsey dominated Juventus. I'll never forget. I was at that game. I lived in Leeds. A friend got me a ticket, and it was at Craven Cottage. And yeah, I went to that match. Yeah, I'll never forget it. People were all, once they found out I was an American, I had so many noogies and neck grabs and shakes. And yeah, unbelievable. I spent, I lived in England twice, 2009, 2010, and 2014, 2015. Yeah, it was one of the highlights of my life as a soccer fan, being at that match. I didn't think anything would happen. Anyway, the Fed can make their job easier if they just chose the best candidate instead of a family member. Here's the thing. Tata Martino was a better candidate. Bielsa at that time was at Leeds United, I think. So he wasn't going to come in, but he had been a candidate before that we didn't want to talk to. I actually think, people ask me this, who would I actually want to replace Greg Berhalter? And, people talk about Van Gaal or Gus Hiddink. I think Hiddink might be a good shout, but I don't think Van Gaal would be right for the team. certainly super accomplished, but he's used to playing, having great players, and we don't have great players. We need to be honest about this. We don't have great players. We have good players. We have some good players, but our standard of players is not very good. It's just not. It's good enough to be the second or maybe even sometimes first team in CONCACAF, but it's not good enough to compete at the level that I think those managers are accustomed to expecting. What I think we need is managers that have experience in both with American players, okay, both abroad and potentially have a knowledge of the domestic game, because they're not going to be no MLS players. You're going to bring in an MLS player sometimes. I think you Jose Mourinho. Yeah, right. We'd never get Jose. Jose only plays systems where he can, Jose buys players. Look, that's a different skill. But that's the thing. Like, I don't think Pep Guardiola would be a good manager for the U.S. men's national team. I think he'd quit in 48 hours when he saw what the players were capable of and not capable of. They're used to coaching at a certain level. And that's the thing about Mourinho as well. He is too. There are three guys in my mind that I think would be excellent candidates for the U.S. men's soccer job, right? And one of them, I think two of them actually, people are going to sort of laugh at, but I'll tell you who they are. So the third is Jesse Marsch. I mean, no one's going to laugh at that, right? Everyone, he knows the American player. He knows he has a great mentality, great attacking mindset. He's also a pragmatic manager. He's not coming. He's not coming. It's not going to happen. So no. So he'll be at Red Bulls. I think these two guys would be perfect. And the reason I think is because the style of play and the types of players they've worked with, the young players they've worked with, the style of play tends to be high pressure with young players, right? They have worked with American players before, so they have an appreciation of American players, and they've also coached at elite clubs in Europe, and they've coached. Well, one of them hasn't coached the national side. I think Chris Coleman, the Welsh run in the Euros, it was pretty much down to Chris Coleman making that team a good, high-spirited, high-pressure, high-energy side. And when you look at that team and the players in it, yeah, they have some really class players in the Premiership, and Gareth Bale is their talisman. But up and down, very inconsistent talent levels, very similar to a different degree as the United States, right? So you have players that play high pressure. I think that he would build the team around Pulisic's strengths and structure it to mitigate his weaknesses. I think you would have a high pressure, exciting, attacking style of football that would dominate the lower level CONCACAF teams and get us close to on par with Mexico. And I think that's a realistic expectation. Chris Coleman was okay at Fulham. He's taken some hits because he's taken some high risk jobs as well. The number one guy that I would like to see at the helm for the U.S. men's national team, and I don't think his reputation in the past couple of years has suffered, I think unfairly. He's kept teams up in the Premiership. He's managed big clubs, and he turned Everton to an absolute monster. He has a love and appreciation for American players. He rated Landon Donovan really highly. Is David Moyes. David Moyes revolutionized high press with false swingers in the EPL and did it for years. Took the Manchester United job, didn't get a transfer window. Everyone knows what happened there. Went to Sunderland. That was a rough spot. Kept West Ham up. Took a job at Real Sociedad that he shouldn't have taken. Everton's crap now, but Everton was not crap when he was there, dude. Like look at the years he was there. They were a club that no one cared about or thought about, and they were top 6 every single year. It wasn't. Expectations. Everton's not always been crap, kind of. You're having a laugh. It was. They were always in Europa League contention, and he took guys, young players that honestly some people threw on the trash heap, didn't particularly care for, plucked them out of nowhere. Nobody was a believer in Tim Cahill. Nobody was. He turned them into a force, right? So if you're playing, imagine him playing a 4-3-3 with the youth of McKennie, Adams, Dest, Pulisic, Josh Sargent. He would get the most out of those youngsters. I really believe it. Moyes wasn't particularly great with Manchester United. The results weren't that bad, but anyway, I'm not going to sit here and fight for David Moyes with you guys. Obviously, you disagree, but that would be my pick. I think the tactics he employs, the style of play, his familiarity with the American style of play, the familiarity with the American system and the American player, I think is really, really good. Anyway, you guys clearly disagree, and that's okay. But I'm a David Moyes fan. I think he has a bad rep. I think that he was a great coach for over a decade at Everton. Turned them from completely irrelevant and never winning. I mean, they never ever finished above Liverpool before he got there, and then they did numerous times. So anyway, give me a break. Right. So okay, we're getting a little bit close to wrap up time. But I wanted to open it up for a few more questions. Let's talk about style of play. What style of play should the United States employ tonight against Canada? What do you think? Yeah, and Wales did outperform their talent level, absolutely. And the thing is, look, Chris Coleman isn't a tactical genius, but he's not a dummy either. He's great at building a squad character. And I think he's good at selecting the right players. And, he had essentially 2 or 3 really good players, and the rest of them were pedestrian guys playing in lower leagues. And I mean, obviously his great player was Gareth Bale, but our great player is Christian Pulisic. So different. Pressing style, not possession Guardiola crap. Imagine if we had Guardiola type players. That'd be amazing. It's okay not to have the ball as long as I mean, we should share the possession about 50-50, I think. The big thing is meaningful possession, scoring chances. Like, yeah, I want us to play high press. We won't. But I do think it's going to make a huge difference. Alfredo Morales starting. I know some U.S. men's team fans aren't massive fans. But what I will say is you haven't watched him in a while. He's a solid player. And, no, he's not a, he's not going to go out there like Xavi or Iniesta, but he's going to go out there like an angry Jermaine Jones with a little bit, I think a little bit more self-control sometimes. So that'll be an upgrade of Will Trapp and Michael Bradley. Absolutely. I agree. Let's see here. I'm tired of playing scared. Yeah, I think we all sort of agree on this. Thank you for sticking with me. I have a video coming up about Alexei Lalas and his hot takes about Darlington Nagbe and Zlatan Ibrahimovic. So please stay tuned within the next week for that. Obviously, depending on how the match goes tonight, you may see some new content from me relatively quickly, depending on, how we play or what happens. If it's not different than I expect, then I probably won't make a video right away. If something happens with Greg Berhalter, one way or the other, you would expect a video from me. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Thank you very much. Please hit the like button. Remember to subscribe, and please share this with people that you think might like the content. I should probably get more regular about making content every week. But yeah, I would love for you to share. And please, if you're on Twitter, find me at Gabe from New Hampshire, GABE from NH. Gabe from NH at Twitter. I'd love to interact with you on this. You'll see me live tweet the match. And would love to just kind of hear what you have to say. Thank you all for tuning in. It has been fun. I'm going to go drink some tea because my throat is shredded. All right. Go men's national team. I believe that we